Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 83. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation, on this championship weekend. We'll find out by Sunday night who will represent the AFC and NFC for this year's Super Bowl. Dave, how you doing?
Happy Friday. I am doing well. In a cram session of trying to learn as much as I can about as many of these Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl prospects and start getting into draft season a little bit more and prepared to talk about maybe a few more prospects today with you, along with everything else that we have going on. Hope you are well. Hope you are staying warm.
Yeah, a little warmer here, a balmy 19 degrees in Pittsburgh right now. So it's a heat wave out here for sure. All right, I think as you mentioned, maybe on the previous show and just posted on Twitter, we're sending our guys down to the college NFL draft all-star games. A lot of guys just touched down in Texas for this year's Shrine Bowl, which has a ton of interesting prospects, including potential top quarterback Shedeur Sanders and all the fanfare that, of course, comes along with that. And we'll have some guys that are about ready to fly down to Mobile, Alabama for this year's Senior Bowl as well. So going to be wall-to-wall coverage from that aspect in terms of player interviews, practice reports, who the Steelers are talking to, and of course they're going to talk to basically everybody, but still always important to keep an eye on what Mike Tomlin is watching, and we'll be watching what Mike Tomlin is watching. So I want to make a note of that. It's always a fun time of year, Dave.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe later this afternoon or within a couple hours, we'll have the official measurements come out from the Shrine Bowl as well, too. So look for those on SteelersDepot.com. Hopefully at some point during Friday and by Saturday at the latest, I would think. So we usually try to get those in and up early as part of this process.
Yeah, Dave will have a post on those heights and weights and measurements for the Shrine Bowl and for the Senior Bowl. That'll come the latter early next week. All right, Dave, some news here, just some very light housekeeping information. TJ Watt will not participate in this year's Pro Bowl games. He has pulled out due to injury, presumably the ankle and thumb injuries that he had. You mentioned before, too. I know him and his wife are expecting their first child around this time. Maybe that played a factor as well. So Watt will not go down to Orlando this year, I think, for the Pro Bowl games. He'll be replaced by Baltimore Ravens linebacker Kyle Van Noy. Watt is also one of 5 finalists for this year's Defensive Player of the Year award, trying to win it for the second time. He is not the favorite, though, seems unlikely to win it. The other 4 finalists are Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson of the Bengals, Zach Bond of the Eagles, and favorite cornerback Patrick Surtain II from Denver. Surtain won the DPOY for the Pro Football Writers of America this year, which is usually a pretty good indication of where the actual AP voting is going to go. So could Watt win it? Sure, but I think it's pretty unlikely at this point.
I agree with you. Had he definitely in those final several games of the regular season, had he been hit some sacks and all like that, made a couple of big plays, he certainly would have helped his case. I believe probably going into those final 4 games, he was the favorite or thereabouts. But really the production, at least on the traditional stat sheet, waned off there, and I think that kind of hurt him. So I'm not expecting him to win the award this year.
And frankly, I think the consensus, even for Steelers fans and myself, is he doesn't deserve to win it. I wouldn't be mad if he did, but last year he had a much, much stronger case to win it when he finished runner-up to Myles Garrett. This year, I think given the last 3 games of the regular season plus postseason, 0 sacks for the first time in his career, to have that kind of 4-game streak. And I mean, listen, still a great player, still impact player. I do not want to trade TJ Watt. That always comes up in the local media this time of year when Pittsburgh comes off these one-and-done seasons. It happened last year. Should they trade TJ Watt? I have zero desire, zero interest to do that. And of course, it's not going to happen. But just from an objective, standpoint, Watt's resume was not his strongest this year.
Yeah, I imagine Colin Cowherd about 4 more times before the start of this next season. We'll put it out there again. I think he already has that the Steelers should trade everybody for everybody at this point. But yeah, we'll sit and wait and see what the results are. And obviously, the Pro Football Writers, that you can usually rubber stamp a lot of times how those awards go over to the AP awards for most of them.
Right. And Surtain seems to be the favorite considering he won the DPOY award for that Pro Football Writers of America. Watt was the only Steeler to appear on any of the finalist lists. And again, these awards will officially be announced during NFL Honors. By the way, Pittsburgh, of course, has their Man of the Year, Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, and Larry Ogunjobi. We'll see if he wins that, if Pittsburgh can go back-to-back after Cam Heyward won it last year. But speaking of Heyward, that was the one guy you thought maybe could get on a finalist list, maybe for DPOY, but I thought certainly for Comeback Player of the Year, given the kind of recommendation and mandate to make these for about returning from injury, more so than just he was bad last year and then he was good the following year. I thought Heyward fit that perfectly. I forget all the list of the 5 finalists, but Heyward did not make that cut, which is disappointing.
Yeah, and it's probably because he was able to get back during last season. I wonder how much that hurt him from just people globally looking at it about the amount of actual games that he ended up playing in. But you could make a strong argument that I would certainly listen to, and probably the national beat writers should listen to an argument that Cameron Heyward could have been on both of those lists. But, obviously he's not, and he can put that in his notes and tape that to his locker as motivation going into this next season. It goes without saying, though, that he had a tremendous 2024 season, and here's to hoping he can equal that or exceed that in 2025.
I hear you. And the 5 finalists that did make it for Comeback Player of the Year is Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, Minnesota Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold, LA Chargers running back J.K. Dobbins, Patriots corner Christian Gonzalez, and Bills safety DeMar Hamlin. So we'll see who wins it. I know people thought Hamlin was going to win it last year, went to Joe Flacco, and that's when the award kind of was tweaked to be more focused on injury and returning from medical-related issues. But Heyward, I thought, deserving, probably was Darnold hurt last year? Darnold wasn't hurt last year. Just a backup, wasn't he? So how did he get on this list?
Yeah, that's a good question.
But anyway, it's all bygones be bygones. And I think Heyward had a really strong year overall, and Steeler fans and NFL fans who watched the game all recognize that. One other piece of housekeeping news here, Dave.
Zach Frazier did make the all-rookie team for the Pro Football Writers, though.
Oh, good point. Yeah. So that was that first team or second team?
I believe they just had the one team, didn't they?
One team. Okay, just the one team. So he made it for that. So well deserved, and that's a guy that I when they drafted him, you knew you were going to get a solid player. I think even me is a little pleasantly surprised about what the ceiling might actually be for Frazier. I think it's going to be higher than what I pegged it to be coming out of West Virginia.
Remember, I had him as my first round draft pick. I mean, if you were to redraft right now after his rookie season, he'd be a first rounder, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I think almost undoubtedly, just based on the really solid season that he had. Now, I think the other centers did a good job this year. Graham Barton in Tampa Bay, Powers Johnson kicked back out to left guard, but he seemed to have a decent year after some injury issues tripped him up to kind of begin. But yeah, I think Frazier was as good as almost any offensive lineman in general from this class, probably him and Joe Alt.
Yeah, I think you can make a good argument. Top 5 center in the NFL right now,
It'd be good. That'd be a fun exercise. I don't know. I'd have to sit down and try to rank out the list, but he's not super far off if he's not in the top 5 already.
Right.
Looks like some just NFL news as we're getting the head coaching spots filled, and the whole Liam Cohn situation was really crazy to follow last night. And here's one too. Looks like the Raiders are going to tap Pete Carroll as their next head coach. It's not official, but the two sides are trying to work out an agreement. So Pete Carroll, out of football last year, a longtime coach of the Seahawks. Could Russell Wilson go to the Raiders, Dave, and reunite with Pete Carroll, team that needs a quarterback? That's a possibility.
I don't think that's unthinkable or impossible, as I like to say, especially because they are going through a flux at the quarterback position right now as well, too. Now, the Raiders will probably try to draft one early, one would think, but if you needed a veteran to come in to kind of hold down the ship, obviously the relationship between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson still seems to be strong after all these years. So I don't think that's totally out of the question. And Russell Wilson already on the media circuit early this offseason, was on the Pat McAfee Show a couple of days ago. We can kind of, it was more of a, hey, I'm out here, I'd like to, he saying all the right things tour, and kind of, the people are probably saying, well, man, Russell Wilson's getting an early start on this year, and why wouldn't he? A little bit different situation, because he had to kind of wait to see what, the official, even though he knew what was going to probably transpire with the Denver Broncos last offseason, that couldn't officially happen, I don't think, until right after the start of the new league year last year. So it makes sense from a PR perspective for Russell Wilson to get out there early and kind of get kind of the where he's at and what he's looking for out of the way. And I would not be surprised if early on, moving on into the early stages of this offseason, that we see Russell Wilson show up on like Good Morning Football and, I don't know, Kay Adams and some of these other shows, just keeping his name out in circles out there. Was there anything earth shattering that you thought that Russ, he kind of tried to tamper down his relationship with Arthur Smith, and he talked about the development with younger players, and had a lot of praise for Calvin Austin III. Kind of essentially saying most improved, I guess you would say, as far as talent on that roster. Anything else stick out to you from what Russell Wilson had to say to Pat McAfee?
Well, let me ask you this. Russ, whenever he was asked, said that there's some early contract talks or early talks with Pittsburgh to return in 2025, and he expressed his desire to not only re-sign with Pittsburgh but retire as Steeler, and he wants to play into his early 40s, he said. So we're talking 4 or 5 more years. How much does that mean to you when Wilson says he's having early conversations with Pittsburgh? Is that
Not much.
A sign? No? Okay.
Yeah, just probably, and I would imagine the Steelers are still trying to look at several different options and angles, and the notorious thing that they like to say is, we're not closing a door on anything or anybody, and I would imagine that there are some preliminary feelers out there saying, we would be open to possibly having you return. I think it's just, the early gratuitous kind of conversations at this time. I wouldn't imagine that it's set in stone type situations.
Yeah, I wouldn't say set in stone, and I take that comment with a grain of salt, but we'll see where it goes. Still unsure who this team's quarterback will be in 2025. I know Art Rooney is going to likely speak here within probably a week or so, although I really don't expect him to say much, or at least offer a lot of clarity on it. I think he'll speak highly of Fields and Russ and say we like both. We'll see where it goes, all the kind of platitudes you would expect from a relatively quiet owner. So we'll see where it goes.
Well,
anything else from the Wilson McAfee interview? There really was not a whole lot of substance there, but aside from that comment about the Arthur Smith thing, tamping down those comments, which continue. Jerry Dulac keeps reporting that there was a disconnect between Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson. No expansion what that means, but that's the continued reporting from him, and thought the contract talk was notable as well.
All right. Definitely think it's plausible that there could have been some disconnect, whatever that looks like. I do kind of keep rolling back and wondering about the time when Mike Tomlin decided to make the switch, and once Russell Wilson was fully healthy, I wonder how much pushback a guy like Arthur Smith maybe had within that, So I mean, we'll obviously see how this play. I don't think it's to the point where those two guys couldn't work together moving forward, but there might have been some disagreements along the way.
Yeah, I just wish again we had more information, like I said previously, to get some detail of what exactly that means, where the disagreement was, because it felt like a pretty good marriage on paper, but maybe you just never know how personalities work and clash. And again, Wilson saying that those reports really don't have much merit to them, but those reports continue to circulate.
All right.
One other piece of news here, and it's just an eye towards the future. We've known since last May that Pittsburgh would host the 2026 NFL Draft. We now have official dates on when that'll take place. The 2026 NFL Draft Day will occur April 23rd through the 25th in Pittsburgh. Still not 100% sure where that's going to take place, somewhere downtown Pittsburgh, North Shore, Acrisure Stadium, but no concrete specifics on the exact locations. Point State Park as well. But mark your calendars for next April 23rd to 25th will be a really big weekend in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exciting time, especially for local fans. And I would imagine several people close to the area in Ohio and Virginia. And I mean, it's not often that people get an opportunity, that close of proximity, especially when the home team of the Steelers is hosting this. And this might not happen again, obviously, for several more years. So I won't be there. I would imagine that you won't be down in the middle of that either, but it will definitely help the city and tourism and everything that goes along with that. So I imagine the closer we get to that, the more we'll learn, and maybe we'll be able to send a person or two from Steelers Depot down into that.
Yeah, you and I will be glued to our computers that weekend. That's exactly where we will be, even though the draft is going to be just a short drive away from me. All right, Dave, where to from here? Kind of the talk of the week is Jim Rooney, one of the Rooney family members who has no role in the organization, to be clear, but of course has close ties. Went on an interview this week and was asked about the state of the team, and he said he did not want to make excuses, but then kind of made a bunch of excuses for why the team has not had the success that they're accustomed to and what the standard is in Pittsburgh. He cited facing some tough quarterbacks in Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and more recently guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then kind of tried to spin Pittsburgh's lack of success is still a good thing in the sense of they're above the mean of what the average team does, that they are consistently competitive. Tried to kind of play up that angle some, and it's drawn a lot of feedback, a lot of criticism from the fan base. It feels like those comments are tone deaf and they water down the standard in Pittsburgh. What do you make of those comments, Dave? Are they reflective of how ownership and Art Rooney feels? Is this just nothing? What's your take?
Well, his last name is Rooney, right? So anytime you have that and you say some of the things that he said, it's going to be easy to attach to the organization. I do wonder how close he is to the organization, right? To Art Rooney II. He did, and in essence, the takeaway is you fans are spoiled, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the tone of like, hey, we're a competitive team, and a lot of fan bases would kind of kill to be in the place that Pittsburgh is in, was kind of the read I got on his comments.
All right, what's the main kind of quotes that are kind of being tossed around right now?
I'll have to look. I mean, part of it was also not absolving Tomlin, but saying the issues of why Pittsburgh hasn't won. It's not a Tomlin thing. It's an organizational thing. I can pull up some of the exact quotes here in a moment if you just give me a second. I've kind of written about it quite a bit, but let me just pull it up here.
He also had that they would burn. What did he say?
Burn the city down if they won 3 games or something like that. Yeah, this is on the Ross Tucker podcast, by the way. Rooney says, again, Jim Rooney says about the Steelers' lack of postseason success, quote, I think it's an organization issue, not just Mike. I think all of us are responsible for the outcomes, but I think we take responsibility. I don't want to get into excuse making, but the reality is we outperform the NFL mean at a greater rate than just about any team. for the last 25 years. I think if this was a boxing match and you were judging the competition, not just looking at the winning percentage, you would say that we have performed in a harder circumstance than most and outperformed them. And so that's the quote there from Rooney. And for you're kind of a boxing guy, Dave, I think you judge boxers by winning percentage. And the sports are, did you win or did you lose? And that's where I think the comments will raise some eyebrows.
So the new slogan is the median is the standard, right? Not the standard.
Right.
I understand why this is getting so much talk overall. I would be interested what's going on behind closed doors, maybe between conversations between Jim and Art, because of how this kind of blew up here. I do think, though, that you do have to look at this organizationally and not just as a Mike Tomlin thing, but and I do think that you have to take into account the quote unquote franchise quarterback aspect of it. And look, it's going to be hard moving forward for us, even as we have a fan side to us and a very objective side to us as well too, until we see this team make hay at the quarterback position specifically, no matter how good an offseason looks and all like that. It's going to be a long time, I think, before we're talking about Super Bowl windows opening and potential championships. And it has unfortunately gotten to a point right now where we're thinking, hey, can we see this team at least win a playoff game? And every year to hear Art Rooney and Omar Khan come out and say, our goal is unequivocally to win a Super Bowl. And at this point now, and after hearing this so many years in a row, obviously now you do kind of wonder, okay, that all looks good, trying to sell it in the early off season, but we have to see things progress, and we do have to see this team win a playoff game. And to roll back to what Art Rooney said that last year during his sit down, that it's time, and obviously not achieving that goal this past season. Is it going to be it's time part two? To win a playoff game, and is that what quote unquote the standard is? So I mean, I look, I understand the consternation, but to me, it's not just Tomlin; it's the organization, at a whole right now. It does, we had the conversation recently. Does it seem like this organization is stalled right now in the perpetual 10-7, 9-8 winning seasons, and but no playoff win, and then you get to the draft and you're always right there in the 20 to 25 range, which means you'd have to make a huge jump up probably to get a franchise quarterback. And what makes matters even worse is this year you're heading into a class that does not seem to be overly deep at the quarterback position overall, and it makes you kind of wonder, all right, are they going to rerun it back with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields? Are they going to go out and try to get another cast off high draft pedigree experienced quarterback to see if they can Frankenstein this thing up into a playoff team, and one that could potentially make a run? So I understand all of it. Long story short, I don't think Jim Rooney's comments has helped Art Rooney out ahead of his annual end of the year, State of the Union address, if you will.
Yeah, I think if Art could have a quiet moment with Jim, and maybe it's happened, he would say, please stop trying to sell the book for a little bit, because she get asked about everything else. And because that's part of the reason why Jim Rooney goes on, is he's written some books on the franchise and on the late Dan Rooney, and still promoting those. But I didn't really have much of a reaction to it. I can understand the optics don't look good, but Jim Rooney's not a member of the organization. He's not working with the team. You could sit there and say, well, maybe Art Rooney has the same feelings and thoughts as Jim, and we'll hear from Art here in a little bit. I think Art's expressed, and he did express last year, his impatience for this team's lack of success and not winning a playoff game, which I assume has only been intensified. Not that I'm feeling.
What would Dan Rooney do, Alex, this offseason?
It's a good question. I mean,
everybody rolls that back out. Since his passing several years ago, it seems like the annual. What would Dan Rooney do if Dan Rooney were still alive right now and running things?
I mean, I don't know how much different it would be in the sense of, Art has been pretty hands off, pretty patient, pretty stable. And, Dan did the same. Not that the streak was as long, but there were some rough years under Bill Cowher. There was a lot of questions about, can Bill Cowher get over the hump? Early 2000s, late 90s, where the team wasn't very good, where I'm sure if the internet and Twitter and social media was in its existence like today, you'd be hearing the same complaints about that. They stuck with Chuck Noll throughout the 80s, despite the team. They won some playoff games, but they spun their wheels. They never really were consistent Super Bowl competitors, obviously. So it's an impossible question, obviously. I don't feel like things would be dramatically different if Dan Rooney was still around.
The thing with Bill Cowher, obviously, it took him a while to win a Super Bowl, right? But he did win some playoff games, right? What was the longest span that he went without winning a playoff game?
Yeah, it's probably a couple. Not as long as the current streak. I've made mention many times.
Right.
This is Pittsburgh's longest drought, basically in franchise history. Post merger, and unless you count that, the pre-merger of 33, till 72, that whole chunk of games there, or chunk of time there, post-merger, it's been their longest streak. Looks like maybe 98 through 2000, just eyeballing it, Dave. Does that look right?
I don't have it pulled up here, but that sounds right.
Yeah, because they didn't make the playoffs from 98 through 2000. They went 7-9, 6-10, and 9-7. Then they went 13-3. Made it to the AFC title game. That was that first loss to the Patriots. It was at Troy Brown's long punt return touchdown. So again, I imagine during that time, coming out of the 2000 season, there's probably a lot of heat on Bill Cowher for a team that didn't make the playoffs 3 straight times, which has never happened under Mike Tomlin. So that might be the most comparable situation to Pittsburgh's lack of playoff wins for 8 years.
And obviously didn't have the social media aspect involved with that, or else there would have been a lot of fire Cowher every offseason.
Yeah. Now, to go back to a point I was going to make earlier, again, not that I feel bad for the organization. This is their own making, but I don't know what you could say to placate the fan base. If you're Art Rooney, if you're the team and says what they always say, which is we want to compete for a Super Bowl, I think people will just roll their eyes at that at this point. It's kind of what you said earlier, Dave, where they're not really a Super Bowl contender. And some people would make the argument that it's actively harmful to try to compete for a Super Bowl because you aren't. And so you're just going to spin your wheels even more trying to compete for something you can't achieve, which, means retooling, but not rebuilding, not tearing this thing down and trying to hit a hard restart button. So if you say that, I think people will tune it out, even though it sounds good. If you say what Jim Rooney said about just kind of being a good, solid team, you get the reaction you're getting. And of course, if you sit there and say, we're going to blow it up and tank, some people will like that, but it's going to be a lot harder in practice to actually watch that unfold. So I don't think there's really anything they can say at this point. It just truly is about results, which it should be. It should be.
Sure. How should the heat be turned up from the media in this sit down with Art Rooney this time? We've already talked about how his words from last year will and should probably be thrown back at him and all. I would like to hear him talk about the franchise quarterback aspect in today's NFL, and really not just today's NFL, for the last, insert time date there. Go going back to even 2000s and really since the Brady era came in. How there's X amount of quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl since then, and if you look at the AFC side, these X amount of quarterbacks have played in the AFC Championship game, and then obviously you've got guys like Patrick Mahomes, aiming for another one, and if not him on one side, the continued emergence of a guy like Josh Allen in Buffalo, and obviously Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Those teams always seem primed. If you're going to build a list of 4 teams in the AFC right now who you would expect to seriously compete for a Super Bowl, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be Josh Allen. It's going to be Lamar Jackson. You could probably start throwing Joe Burrow's name in there now, right? At this aspect, you don't want one team you're not going to put in there right now, and until something changes, is the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? And I guess I would just say, we hear year in and year out from both Art Rooney and Omar Khan, and I would pose this question to Art Rooney about how the goal is to win a Super Bowl, but what realistic outlook do we have to something like that? What steps are being made when on the outside it does not look like you have a franchise quarterback right now, for us to grab on to that and believe that it's just not lip service?
Yeah, I think if you tried to frame a question, you sit there and say, Pittsburgh is always a team and you're always an organization, Art, that believes they can win a Super Bowl, and yet you don't have a franchise long-term quarterback. How do you plan to win a Super Bowl without that guy? Would be my first kind of question and approach. To your idea about how do you put more pressure under Rooney, you can ask some tougher questions, and the media should, and hopefully they do. But at the end of the day, he's the owner. No one can fire him. Nobody can. He is head honcho. And so I believe there's only so much pressure you can really put on Art Rooney to change because he's in charge.
Okay. I see. Yeah. And look, they're not hurting from an attendance or a global merchandise perspective and all like that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure their coffers are doing just fine overall. I think you could ask and should ask what makes Mike Tomlin the right coach going forward. You've had 8 straight years of no playoff wins. You talked about the need to get over this hump last year. You ended up in the same spot as, like, literally the same spot, 10-7, wild card, one and done on the road. What makes Tomlin the guy to stick with? I think that's a fair question to ask. I know part of the reason is, again, Rooney won't tell you this, but the $50 million they just paid him. So that's going to be a component of it, obviously. And I wouldn't expect an amazing answer from Rooney, but if you want to ask some more difficult questions to kind of turns the heat on the situation, that's the direction I would go.
All right. And how would you throw back some of the comments that Jim Rooney just made to Art Rooney?
I personally wouldn't. I wouldn't be shocked if he was asked. I would throw back Rooney's own comments last year and say, you talked about you were impatient last year and things were going to change, and yet they did literally stay the same in result. Yes, things changed organizationally, personnel, the quarterback swapping out, but the output and outcome was the same. How can this continue? So I would just look at Art Rooney's own comments.
Yeah, and we expect that to happen. And I would like to ask him about some of these precedents as well, too, that we constantly talked about in the list that you and I kind of built a couple of shows ago, and all about the guaranteed money and aspect and the quote unquote perceived hierarchy, Mark, when it comes to outside free agents and those kind of things. Because if they keep doing what they're doing and have done for a while, when it comes to some of these perceived precedents, it especially without a franchise quarterback right now on the roster, it just feels like you're doing just enough to build a team that can maybe make the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game, right?
Yeah, that's the kind of the stuck element that Pittsburgh is dealing with right now, unfortunately. So anyway,
people want us to talk about what Jim Rooney said, and shame on us for maybe not doing that right out of the chute on that last show, particularly. But I mean, I don't know how far people want us to go down that rabbit hole that we haven't already talked about when it comes to the future of Mike Tomlin and where Art Rooney sits with all this.
Yeah, so we're addressing it now. Like I said, I mean, he's not working for the team. Would be certainly different if he was in an official role for the team, but I understand his closeness in the Rooney last name carries weight in Pittsburgh, and anytime those members speak, it's going to gain some traction, at least locally.
What all has to happen this offseason to get you to any kind of point where you're thinking, okay, maybe this team can compete for a Super Bowl?
And we've talked about it before. It's hard to see a path in which that happens unless something crazy occurred where they landed a quarterback, or you convince yourself that, say, Justin Fields the light comes on for him and he becomes what he was supposed to be out of the draft. It is going to be really, really hard to sit there and convince yourself that they're going to be a Super Bowl team. Maybe you can convince yourself they can win a playoff game if they make the right pieces, to make some splashy moves. But to me, it's really, they got to show me before I believe it.
Does a Sam Darnold do anything for you?
No, not in terms of Super Bowl contention. No.
Is there any other young quarterback around the league? You got the Will Levis, people kind of wondering what's going to happen with him maybe this offseason. Is there any recent young quarterback that was drafted that might go the way of a Justin Fields real quick that excites you?
I'd have to look at a list, but I doubt it. Will Levis is certainly not one of those guys. I'd have to see a list of names and who might be available, but anybody who's done well in recent years is staying, I'm sure, in their current location. Bryce Young turned things around. He's staying. CJ Stroud is, of course, staying. So I don't see, if you want to just play a super hypothetical game, and I'm just playing like crazy hypotheticals in January, Anthony Richardson of the Colts, the team organization might be souring on him based on his rockiness, and he left the game last year and maybe some immaturity things. Could you take a swing at him, I suppose, but I'm not advocating for that. But if just to answer your question about young quarterbacks you could talk yourself into.
And everybody will throw out the kid's name over there in Minnesota, but the way Sam Darnold's season ended, I mean, you still have that kid on a rookie contract. Why? And you haven't even seen him play a snap for you. Why? Unless you got a king's ransom for him, why would you part with that?
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy's not going to go anywhere. I wouldn't expect. So Pittsburgh, like I said, their quarterback options this year are limited. It is most likely bringing back one of Russ or Fields. Probably, I shouldn't say probably, maybe drafting somebody in the mid rounds or at least day 2 and beyond. I think Jalen Milroe makes as much sense as anybody for what they will do. I'm not a big fan of Milroe, but I could see it happening. You have Skylar Thompson, maybe add another low level vet, and that's probably your quarterback room next year.
All right,
Dave, let's talk about potential free agency splashes. And you've mentioned a lot about T. Higgins already, but had a good article yesterday that kind of outlined, you can wish cast and hope and cross your fingers for T. Higgins. And there's good reasons for that. But in all likelihood, it's probably not going to happen. So if you want to expand on that, feel free.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of all my thoughts that have been running around, finally get them down in ink and all like that. Now, I even started this post off with how great would current Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins look in the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Pittsburgh Steelers black and golden. Personally, I would love to see that happen, and I'm fairly sure a lot of people reading the site and listening to this podcast feel the same. And while there's nothing to prevent, or especially early in the offseason, for kind of wish casting and hoping that such a thing will happen, there's nothing in deep down inside with the way that this organization's currently ran to think that will happen. First and foremost, he's got to make it to free agency, and to hear Joe Burrow talk and what I think the Bengals should do is try to keep that core together as long as possible, even though you might do it with the intentions of it being long term, but the reality of it only being a couple of year window for before you have to kind of blow it up, if you will. We'll just have to see if T. Higgins does reach free agency, if they place the franchise tag on him again, if they do indeed let him test the market. But if he is allowed to test the market, then from where we sit right now, it seems like T. Higgins is going to be the biggest prize on the free agent market in the story. PFF has him ranked number one right now as far as potential free agents. I imagine NFL.com and several other major media sites will follow suit here. Obviously, you could have somebody cut from a team that maybe rivals him as a street free agent. We'll have to wait and see how that list builds out here, but PFF already has Higgins listed as the top unrestricted free agent. They have put a prospective price tag on him at $28 million a year. That would rank Higgins, I think, 8th overall on the wide receiver list, tie him with Davante Adams while he is still under contract. You could make an argument that supply and demand, and you just don't see these guys. Long story short, if Higgins hits free agency, there are going to be suitors for him, and then you get into the talk about what it would take to land a guy like that. Let's say it is $28 million per year. Well, the next topic of conversation will obviously be guaranteed money past the first year, and the Steelers have just not shown the propensity to go out there in a free agent market. And look, I mean, we were talking last year that what big news it was for this team to get a guy like Patrick Queen at an average yearly value of just over $13.6 million, and how that set a new record as far as average year for an outside free agent. All that being said, they only fully guaranteed the first year of his money. Now, he is due $6.67 million roster bonus coming up here in March, and they'll obviously have to make a decision on that, and I foresee them picking that up and doing business as usual, but that money's not fully guaranteed until he reaches that March date and that roster bonus is exercised there. So, and then, boil back to what the Steelers have done most recently when it comes to fully guaranteed money for non-franchise quarterbacks. Those players have had to be resetting the market, i.e. T.J. Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick. That is really the only way the team went above and beyond first-year money. And when you look at what T. Higgins might want, if you want to roll back to last offseason, where, quote unquote, I think Calvin Ridley was the top free agent prize at the wide receiver position. He got a 4-year, $92 million contract, and that averaged $23 million annually, and it included $46.98 million fully guaranteed, which was essentially the first 2 years of the deal. And that was after Ridley registered 76 receptions for a little over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns the year prior with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So unless the Steelers go out and break precedent, and look, I realize that there was all that talk about them going after Ayuk and several other wide receivers last offseason, but the fact of the matter is that never happened. So until I see this team go out and go after the top of the market guy, such as T. Higgins, and actually land him and do the guaranteed money beyond the first year of the contract, there's no reason that you can convince me to have anything other than hope, just blind fan hope that such a thing will happen.
Yeah, I just don't see it occurring. I'll be happy to be wrong, I suppose, but I think it's a pretty strong veteran wide receiver free agent market. We went over some of the names last episode, and maybe some more names will become free agents. I imagine Davante Adams has a good chance of getting released from New York in that regime, especially if Aaron Rodgers does not return, which we'll see if that happens or not. And you have a draft class as well. And so I don't think Pittsburgh will be players at the very top of the market at receiver. I think they'll add a receiver. I think they'll add somebody probably on a sizable contract at receiver. I don't think it'll be T. Higgins.
I agree. I do think someone will be added from the outside, but I don't think that the list of prospective players that they add at the wide receiver position, should realistically include a guy like T. Higgins right now.
I know I've made this point a couple times, and I'll probably keep making it, but if they sign, assume it's not Higgins, but if they sign Amari Cooper or Devontae Adams or some equivalent, whoever you want to throw out there, whatever your flavor is, Chris Godwin, how much does the Arthur Smith system have to change to support that, or does it have to change at all?
Well, hey, you're going to have to let me know what happens with George Pickens. And
assume Pickens stays for the time being.
If you keep Pickens and you add a bigger name at wide receiver, yeah, you have to start throwing. You have to start throwing the football more.
And are you in less 13 personnel? I imagine that you would be.
Yeah.
To not have one of those guys off the field guaranteed. But the Arthur Smith offense is built around multiple tight end sets, and that's what you brought him in for. So,
well, a good offensive coordinator, as we talked about several years ago or several times over the years, is one that adapts his offense to the talent and not cookie cuts a system in personnel and what his ideal offense would be.
Sure, that's a great point.
He would have to change, and obviously, to make the passing game, we have to see the running game be a lot better than it's been overall. But in today's NFL, you look at these teams that are in this thing right now, and look at the production they've gotten out of the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to explore that some more. I mean, the Chiefs don't have a ton of household names at receiver. They drafted Worthy, but of course they lean on a lot of Travis Kelce and just Mahomes magic. The Bills really don't have any. I mean, they did add Cooper, but he's not been a huge part of their offense, not like his prime.
They do a better job though of spreading the football around, though, right?
Oh, Sure. I mean, I think Arthur Smith's system is designed to spread the ball around, and some of that might be the problem where it doesn't concentrate on its weapons and its top guys the most, and it's more focused on everyone getting touches and everyone's a threat, and that may be a hindrance to them.
Yeah. Look, he definitely would have to take a hard look at what he's doing when and if they add another name to go along with George Pickens.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And to be fair, there are some examples earlier in his career in Tennessee. There was A.J. Brown and Corey Davis for a time. And so there have been instances of two receivers being supported, really no more than that, because you start adding then let's go draft somebody high and Roman Wilson. And it's like, all right, I don't think everyone's going to get all those touches. But I just worry about making sure those guys are utilized. There's been times where it's been tough for the team to get George Pickens the football. And I felt like Pittsburgh's not been creative and inventive enough to try to find ways to get him open, knowing all the attention he gets. Can Smith do that for two guys? I have a concern there.
And it sure didn't hurt that he had Derrick Henry in Tennessee.
Yeah, that also helps in Pittsburgh. Not going to have that in 2025. This is not me saying I'm against the idea of adding receiver help. They need it. My God, they need it. We've talked about that from the moment they traded Deontay Johnson. We said, how are they going to replace receiver? And that's going to be one way to judge this Johnson deal, even though I think they got certainly more out of it than Carolina got with Johnson when Pittsburgh getting back Dante Jackson. But I just worry about making sure that those guys are utilized to their talents, because Smith's offense is so, I think, pretty clear cut, and it has a vision, and it does not often include a second and third wide receiver.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Where to from here? I just want to go back to that Russell Wilson thing, and I'm getting some feedback on Twitter. I don't know exactly what Pete Carroll's involvement was in the trading of Russell Wilson from Seattle to Denver. I assume Carroll had a hand in that, but I wonder what the relationship is like there. But also, the Raiders have Tom Brady as a minority owner, and would Russ want to go play there, and would him and Brady connect? Like, that'd be kind of interesting. So yeah, something there to I think really watch going forward.
I mean, I think other than obvious dot connecting from the time those two spent together, and look, it's hard to imagine the Raiders building a 3 or 4 year plan around Russell Wilson, right?
I don't know.
Even if they brought him in,
he would get probably a 2 or 3 year deal,
right?
So that's
But I
all that
mean,
really matters.
you better be upfront about him about what you plan on doing in the draft.
Yeah, that's true. That is fair. We'll have to see who the OC hire is, what that coaching staff, as it gets put together in the coming days and weeks looks like. But
Is
there was
Bevel still? What Bevel? Where's Bevel at now?
Aaron Bevel. He was down in Miami, I think. I don't know where he's at right now.
I wonder if
He's
they
still
try
in
to get the
Miami.
band back together. If they got, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, he's still the passing game coordinator and QB's coach down in Miami. So keep an eye on that one. I know there was a report last year that Wilson was open to entertaining teams like the Raiders, but ended up going to Pittsburgh. I think obviously for Mike Tomlin and the chance to win more so than the Raiders, but it is kind of back out west for him, where he spent most of his NFL career, really all his career prior to Pittsburgh, in Denver, in the Rocky Mountains, and of course Seattle. So we'll see. Just want to throw that thought out there. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
What kind of market do you think Justin Fields will have this offseason?
And we discussed that some Wednesday. Are you talking about like contractually or just how many teams would be interested in him?
Just loosely teams' interest.
I know last year was super light, like we talked about Wednesday. Everyone saw him as the backup, including Pittsburgh. It's why his trade value was so minimal. I think someone will be willing to take a flyer on him as a starter, or at least to compete for a job. It's going to be a more active market this year than last year when he played reasonably well. I think he showed he can play. When you give this guy good constraints and good stability and organization and get him to play within the scheme, he can cut down on mistakes. He can protect the ball more. Wasn't perfect last year. There were some fumbles, but only one interception across 6 starts is impressive objectively, even if maybe he got lucky once or twice on a ball. The interception that he did have was kind of some bad luck on the ball getting tipped up a couple times against the Chargers and picked off by, was that Bud Dupree? So all of that to say, I think it's going to be a good rehab for his image, his view, and his value. And given the lack of options in free agency of other veteran quarterbacks, and given a weak draft class, that's going to, I think, create a market for Justin Fields.
All right, let's say you're in New York right now with the Jets, and you're the new GM, and you're bringing in a new head coach, and but you know that you either can't or don't like the quarterback class this year. So you need to make your initial. You need to obviously try to put together a team that can compete, and you have to go outside the organization and get a quarterback at least for the next year or two, with eyes on trying to unearth a franchise quarterback like most of the other teams in the NFL. You obviously have Sam Darnold set to void his contract. You're probably going to have a guy like Kirk Cousins out there on the market sooner rather than later. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's still under contract right now, so you can't consider him available. But looking at some of the quarterbacks, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston. Mac Jones is going to be unrestricted, looks like. Jimmy Garoppolo. Oh boy, the name Carson Wentz. It gets thin quick, doesn't it?
Old friend Mason Rudolph.
Russell Wilson. Who of all those names I just named off, who do you make a play for?
Can I say pass? Because that's kind of my
Right.
instinct here. Yeah, it's not a great group, obviously. So
I mean,
that's where I think
Justin Fields does at least kind of stick out on that from a youth perspective, and what you saw at least in the handful of games that he played this past year.
Yeah, I think the top 3 quarterback free agents pending are Darnold, Fields, and Russ, and I think it's pretty clear those are the top 3.
Okay.
So I think that's going to create. Because how many teams are looking for quarterbacks? A bunch of them. I'm not sure the exact number right now. We could probably go through it one day, but probably at least a third of the league is going to have some interest in trying to add a quarterback this offseason.
All right.
I mean, the top 3 teams in the draft all have quarterback needs, right? It's Tennessee, it's Cleveland, and the Giants, I believe, are the top 3. And all 3 searching for a quarterback. So now those teams may sit there and draft somebody, but one of them won't get of the 2 of the Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders. So there's one team right there, and had a bunch more, including the Raiders.
All right. I thought we'd run down that list real quick.
Yeah. All right, Dave, let's kind of talk about, speaking of draft, we've been doing more homework on defensive line prospects. I know we had a good conversation the other day about Derek Carman from Oregon, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. We've continued to watch D-line prospects because we do think it's a real consideration for the first round. It is a strong interior D-line class, and so those things really align properly. You spent time watching Kenneth Gant from Michigan, and who else did you watch?
Deion Walker from Kentucky and Shamar Turner from Texas A&M.
Okay, going to have reports up on most of those guys. I think there's a Walker one going up today or tomorrow. I'll have a report probably for tomorrow on Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. So of those couple guys that you watched, Dave, give some background. Who do you like the most? Who kind of fits Pittsburgh's mold?
Boy, Kenneth Grant. Boy, what a fun guy to watch there. 6'3" and 2/8", at least initially before these All-Star games get underway. Listed at 339 pounds. He is a big dude. He moves extremely well for a guy that size. Moved around quite a bit on the Michigan defensive line. I think over the course of the last 2 years played something like between 65 and maybe 70% of the total snaps for them. Can line up over the nose, can line up over the guards. You can move them on out a little bit there, but very, very impactful. Nice arm over swim move this guy has, along with just raw power. The most does a good job with his hands and arm work overall. There were some situations where I said I'd like to see a little bit more active hands, but his ability, with his base and just the size of this guy and the athleticism for a guy like him allows him to win. He is a guy. He is a four hands guy. Meaning you trying to win against him with one guy with just two hands is hard to do. He is a guy that you probably have to have in the game plan to have four hands on him as much as possible. And even that sometimes is not enough. He even does a good job kind of twisting and some of these stunts and all like that. Very impressive. Got a nice motor as well, too. For a guy his size, will track the football. He has just got one of those noses about him, too, where the football always seems to find him. Whether he's chasing something down and another player knocks the football out, there he is to fall on it. Someone else gets the sack in the backfield that he's close to getting, the ball's out. He finds a way to get it. He chases fairly well as well, too. The question I have about him, look, he should be a first-round draft pick. This year's draft class, obviously would be a fit for a 4-3 team up front. Can play either defensive tackle position, probably stay on the field for more times than not. When you look at Pittsburgh specifically with him, it does make you wonder. Look, he's fantastic nose tackle. Without a doubt. He would fit in the Steelers base unit. It does a good job of getting off blocks and working down the line of scrimmage. Outside zone, does a good job of that Congo line and working his way down and getting into the play and keeping in his gap, that place. Have nothing but compliments about the player. I just wonder in the Steelers type system and the amount of base usage of having a nose tackle on the field. If you drafted a guy like this, you would unequivocally would have to up your base defense usage to have him on the field. Could you have him on the field in some pass rush situations in sub package? Yeah, I suppose you could, but I kind of wonder how versatile he would be as, say, a 5 technique or a 4-eye or something along those lines.
So I know you mentioned it, but give me a little more information on him as a pass rusher. Okay, because I know he's a big guy, but how much?
Push a pocket, can one gap penetrate he can make hay for you in that area as a pass rusher. This team, especially against a guy like Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, you've got to do a better job of pushing the pocket and having contain within that. And he is a guy that I think unequivocally, one tech, zero tech, can do that.
Okay. Yeah, I have not formally watched him. I think I have a report coming up pretty soon on him. We're knocking out some of the top defensive linemen in this, again, very deep class. But I saw a clip of him like chasing down somebody in open grass, which was just super rare to see for a guy of his frame. So somebody that seems really interesting and worth exploring.
Look, I talked about Walter Nolan before this, right out of Mississippi. Grant is as impressive as Nolan was. Grant is a better player, I think,
than Nolan.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
That's interesting. Gotcha. And then
really impressive on film. One of the things that I didn't care, he does have a tendency to stand up off the snap. If he needs to be worked with, I think, of keeping that low center of gravity coming off the ball lower and not standing up as much. But even when he does stand up, so I mean, just a raw power for a guy this size, for him to move the way he does is just really, really impressive. And I think the Steelers unequivocally will be interested with him. I do wonder, though, if you did land this guy, you did land him for some reason, if he was on the board still and you got him in the first round, you got to find a way to get that guy on the field, So do you think another instance, kind of like when you mentioned with Nolan about you be kicking Benton out more to play base end in this scenario, if you hypothetically took Grant? Oh, yeah, absolutely you would. And you'd have to really seriously consider about upping your base usage, I think.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard because it's dictated based on offensive personnel. If you're facing an 11 personnel team, then it's hard to be in your base defense too often. So that's kind of a struggle there. But really seems like a talented guy, freaky athlete. So I'm excited to watch more, and I want to see that guy perform at the combine.
Yeah, and I think he even has some, you see on the tape him actually getting his hands up to him, batting down a couple of passes. He's got an interception, the ball up in the yeah, he's got an interception, a ball bouncing up in the air as well too, and him finding it in the air. He's the more tape you watch on, he's always around the football, and you hear conversations, you run to the football all the time too, because you never know what will happen. The ball somehow, when it's loose sometimes with him, for a guy his size, seems to find him, so super impressive guy. I really, really enjoyed watching the tape on him. And I think, for a guy, once again, his size, he's going to test extremely well. I don't know much. I didn't research his character aspect of him, but they did move him up and down the line. He played a high volume of snaps at Michigan. Once again, you can twist and stunt him. Other than maybe like wanting to see a little bit more hand fighting usage with him. The way this guy wins is bullying you with raw power, hitting the gap quickly, or swimming right over you. There are multiple instances of him just swimming past guys.
What about the other two you watched? Was that Sanders from
Walker out of Kentucky, 6'5", 6'5", 345 pounds. Anytime I see those type of measurables, I get excited when it comes to the Steelers. Turn on the tape with him, not as impressive. I wasn't. He is a big guy. He does not move all that well. Overall, got a kind of a unique stance to him as well too. He's another guy that off the ball stands up. He seems to get stymied more times than not, kind of going through the motions kind of guy. From his measurables to what you to stats to kind of what you expect to see on film, half effort on a lot of snaps. I really didn't like that. I watched him after Grant. Okay. I mean, so it was hard to live up to that, but NFL Draft Scout has him ranked as a first round product, and I think has him ranked 4th overall, at least in their rankings with interior defensive linemen. I think that's too high for him. I did not see it in the selection of tape that I saw. Overall, he is a measurables guy. I think the further that you get into this and the further that people get into his tape, I think you're going to see this guy slip overall in the community.
And so the biggest issues with him, if you had to just talk about maybe why he's a little overrated,
just not impactful. He's just a size guy. Does not play up to what you would think a guy 6'5", 345 pounds. Just not all that explosive. Just doesn't use his hands well. Doesn't really have a signature kind of. You'll see an arm over here. You'll see him kind of bull through occasionally, maybe with some power there. Just not impactful on a play-by-play, down-by-down basis at all. I was not impressed.
Yeah, disappointing, and so probably not the guy for Pittsburgh. And the last one was
Shamar Turner out of Texas
Turner.
A&M, 6'3" and 2/8, 300 pounds. I can't wait to see the arm length on him overall. But very an impactful player. Definitely a guy. If the Steelers lowered the standard when it came to that overall height aspect of him, and look, you're not doing it much at 6'3". I hope he does measure in a little bit taller than 6'3" overall. Very explosive player, very athletic player, very disruptive player. Another guy that plays up and down the defensive line overall. But I was very impressed with his tape. Very impactful on tape. A guy that I think probably easily a top 50 draft pick overall with him, and was very impressed with him on tape.
What was his production like overall? Not that it's a say all end all, but I know Pittsburgh does like those guys to have a level of productivity coming out of college.
Let me pull up his production here real quick. Overall, which All-Star game is he going to be at?
I am not sure, to be honest with you. He's a senior, so maybe the Senior Bowl. I can look that up while you look up his stats.
All right, let me pull these.
Looks like Senior Bowl. Yeah, it looks like Senior Bowl for Turner.
Should have had this pulled up for us getting into it here. They have him listed, by the way, at least on Stathead at 6'4", 285. This past season at Texas A&M, 36 combined tackles, 6 tackles for loss, just 2 sacks, 1 pass defense, 1 forced fumble. In 2023, had 33 combined tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles.
So you saw a lot of production 2 years ago. Maybe quieted down. Maybe that's extra attention that he saw, or just randomness of season to season flow. So interesting. Yeah, the height, I don't want to get so wrapped up on the physical stuff, but I know in Pittsburgh they really have been more height focused, and we'll see what the weigh-in is at the Senior Bowl early next week. But I wonder if he's gonna literally measure up for Pittsburgh.
He should test amazingly well. I think Draft Scout has him. What did they have his preliminary stuff at here? 40 range, 4.72, 40 time, 4.79, another 40 range high, 4.88. So they expect him to probably run somewhere between 4.72 and 4.88.
Yeah, that's big man moving for sure. And that's happening more and more often with these freaky guys at 280, 290 running, 4.7 something, 4.8, low 4.8. So someone also that I'll be watching for and be certainly scanning for during the Senior Bowl reports we get back from the guys.
Yeah, he should turn some heads for sure during the pre-draft process.
So if you had to rank the 3, Walker, Turner, and who was the first one that you'd mentioned?
Grant, Walker, and Turner. It would go Grant, Turner, and then Walker of those 3.
Okay. Is Turner, is he also in the nose tackle bucket? Are any of these guys DNs, or are these guys all more interior and you're kicking Benton out?
I believe Walker's more interior than the other two. I know
that makes sense.
I didn't look at positionally. All three of them moved around, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, because I mean, part of me, there's value in a nose tackle, but part of me wants to try to find that Cam Heyward type, not the next Cam
Right.
Heyward, that's impossible, but like someone who's going to play defensive end, base, 4-eye in a 3-4, and then going to play 3-tech in sub package. Like that's, I think, ideally maybe what you're looking for.
Of these three, probably Turner out of Texas A&M best fits that.
Okay. Yeah, it does feel like Grant and certainly Walker are a little bigger, more 1-tech, 3-tech than they are going to play out towards the tackles.
Right.
And that was kind of the case with me and Tyleik Williams, another one of those top defensive linemen viewed as a potential first-round pick. Really good tape. I liked them ultimately slightly more than Derek Carmen, who I was high on overall. Williams is just a big – he's athletic, but he's a real good plugger against the run. He uses his hands well. He's got a good first step, first off the line. His hand placement's good. He's able to shock linemen back, control blocks, stack and shed. You see some athleticism. Not going to be a high-end pass rusher type of guy. He's a bit more interior, basically played 3-tech for Ohio State. Played out on the end a little bit as well. Used on stunts and games and twists, that kind of pro-style defense, the way that Jim Knowles ran things really well this year for the Buckeyes, obviously. So really good tape overall. He's 325 pounds. I think he's listed at. He got his weight down. He was heavy coming out of high school. His senior season was canceled by the pandemic. He was 360 pounds when he got to Ohio State. He admitted he was fat and had to get his weight down. He dropped it, and so he's in much better shape now. I do think he does tend to tire out towards the end of games a little bit. But overall, his run defense with some good pass rush is a really attractive combination.
Tyleik Williams, right?
Yes, Tyleik Williams.
Draft Scout has him at 6'2" and 1/8, 327.
Yeah, so again, you're probably profiling more nose tackle interior guy than DN. I mean, as we always talk about, Dave, it is so hard to find those true defensive ends. And I know Ross McCorkle has talked about it with us a little bit. I think he talked about it with Joe Clark on the Depot Dive. You guys can check out each week. He had those tweener types. He's talked about Jared Ivey from Ole Miss, one of those guys where it's like Darius Robinson last year, where they have the height, they have the length, they don't really have the sand in the pants to be that base defensive end. And so we know it has been so hard, even though the college system has become more hybrid. Pittsburgh's defense has become more hybrid. It's less the old Okie front than it used to be. It is still hard to find those guys who really fit well in Pittsburgh.
Agreed. And that's why we always tend to, when these all-star games get underway, we kind of look for these kind of guys based on, measurements over the years that the Steelers kind of look for at the defensive end position.
Right. That's where I think Harmon maybe could be a better or smoother schematic fit. But I thought Williams' tape was just a little bit better. He was better against the run. I didn't see a lot of outwardly negatives on him. A little reckless, a little out of control. Sometimes as a pass rusher, one gapping can lose his balance. Like I said, won't be a super high end, pass rusher type. My comp for Williams was Dalvin Tomlinson, who's in Cleveland right now. That was kind of, I think, a pretty good comp. Tomlinson's a guy that gets 3-4 sacks a season, plays good run defense. That's kind of where I see Williams ending up.
All right.
What were the biggest? Well, I guess I already asked you about the weaknesses. Any medical concerns? I don't know how much you went into kind of that aspect, or you just focused on the tape of the guys that you watched.
I just looked at the tape. Let's see. I'm looking at what Draft Scout has. They have nothing in the box for Kenneth Grant. They have nothing in the injury box for Walker out of Kentucky, and with Turner, nothing there. So I'm not seeing any huge medical issues, at least on the surface here.
Let me ask you, I should have included Walter Nolan when I asked you to rank those top three. How would Nolan fit into those three names you mentioned of Grant, Walker, and Turner?
I would go Grant. Tops. I would go probably I would probably even go with Turner next, and then Nolan, And then obviously Walker. I don't think Walker's going to be a fit for the Steelers. I wasn't very impressed with his tape. I'm going to circle back and obviously, because look, I'm the same guy that never saw it with Chris Jones back when he was drafted. We all see how Chris Jones turned out, but watching the couple of games that I watched of Walker, I didn't see the first round tag on him.
And then just to kind of harp on it one more time, how many of these guys that we're talking about could realistically play that 3-4 base end? Nolan, you said, is more interior. You think he's more nose tackle than he would kick out.
Walker sure seemed to be out on the edge a lot,
He feels too big to be out there. So if he's listed 6'6", 340, it feels more interior on him.
Let me see where Shamar.
It sounded like Turner's a guy that could do it. Maybe the height a little less than ideal.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he might have a profile better than the others. Felt like Grant was maybe a bit more interior 3-tech as well, was kind of my feel on it. What do you tell me?
I'm going to have to pull up the alignment charts here real quick.
From PFF?
Yeah, from Shamar.
Yeah. I think for me, Williams is more interior. I think Harmon's the guy for me that could play basically anywhere, but that would include base end. And we have the tape of that because he was doing that in Oregon's odd front, which again, like those Wisconsin guys, makes that projection easier when you see a guy do it in college.
All right, I've got Turner pulled up, snaps by position last year. Defensive left or right tackle combined, those were about 378 total snaps. Left or right nose tackle, only 6 snaps. A traditional nose tackle, 86 snaps. Right end and left end combined, 48 snaps.
Okay.
So he was mostly a defense. He mostly was a defensive tackle overall.
Mm-hmm.
I can get by, let's see, defensive grades and alignment for him. 2024 defensive alignment snaps, A gap 92 snaps, B gap 377, over the tackle 48, and outside of that 12 snaps.
All right. Well,
so he was predominantly a B gap guy. 377 snaps versus A gap at 92.
Yeah, so we're talking 1-tech, 3-tech is basically what that's telling us. On the others, I don't know if you can. It's kind of some work to pull all those guys up.
Let's see. Pull up Walker here in his alignment. Oh, why did that not find him?
But he does feel more interior. But we'll see what the numbers say.
All right, Walker, A gap last year in Kentucky, 142 snaps, B gap 247 snaps. I wonder why he played. I'll have to look at 99 over the tackle and 36 outside. He played just 540 snaps last year in total. Once again, 142 over the A, 247 in the B gap, and 99 over the tackle and 36 outside.
Yeah, we're seeing more interior from him. And then on Grant, we talking similar story, A gap, B gap.
Let me pull up Kenneth Grant here.
Where are you seeing the A gaps and B gaps? I don't even see that.
If you go to the defensive team report, if you go to the player and then the
drop the entire team.
Right, no. Just go to the player and then on the menu over to the side, where it gives you the choice to go snaps by position, defense, click defense, and then scroll down to the bottom of season grades down there, and then scroll that over to the right. You get the alignment snap counts on there.
Oh, heck, I honestly never even knew that before. So
Oh
thank you.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Kenneth Grant at Michigan
Hmm.
last year. A gap 170, B gap 368, over the tackle 5, outside 0. 2023 110 A gap, 283 B gap, 9 over the tackle and 1 outside.
Yeah, so we're seeing that consistent theme of these are interior guys. These are one tech, three tech, playing Menton's position primarily right now, more
Right,
so than what they would need in replacing Cam Heyward in the long term and Larry Ogunjobi in the short term.
right.
And that's where I go to Derek Harmon to do the same here. Now he was a D tackle primarily in 2023, only 12 tackles over or 12 snaps over tackle, but in 2024, 28 snaps in A gap, 353 in B gap, but 188 over the tackle and 21 out wide. And so it's a lot of B gap stuff there, but you're seeing 188 snaps over the tackle, which helps that projection for Pittsburgh to play that 4-eye and occasional 5 tech.
What do you think his length's going to come in at if you were to guess
I
on the
think
arms?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm often off on those. Don't have a great eye for it, but he's got a good frame. I mean, I think he'll be at least 33 inches. I think he'll kind of meet the benchmark there. And again, Pittsburgh seems to be willing to sacrifice a bit of length. They seem to still prioritize height and weight, so these guys can see and not get kind of engulfed. So I think he'll be 33 at least inch arms.
But is he going to be closer to 6'2"? I mean, Draft Scout has him as 6'2", 1/8. How is that some of those? This rolls back to kind of some of the things that the Steelers need to think about, right? When it comes to uh, precedence and size, certain measurables.
Derek Carmen, I have Derek Carmen on draft scout at 603.
I'm sorry. I thought you were on Williams.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I might have said it wrong, but I'm
Oh,
on
my
Derek Carmen.
bad. Yeah, they have him at 6'3", 310.
Yeah, and he's listed 6'5", so I'm hoping he's able to at least click in above 6'4". We'll have to see. But yeah, I think the size profile is going to be pretty much in line for Pittsburgh.
Okay,
Oh,
all right.
that's what I'm kind of banking. Let me look at Williams here really quickly. I expect it to be more interior on
Okay.
Ty League. That's actually pretty interesting. 2024, 12 snaps, A gap, 403 and B gap, a 157 over tackle, 147 over tackle in 2023. And so that's a guy, his body type to me is a more interior guy. He's a thicker lower half. He's barrel chested. He kind of looks more interior, more three tech. And of course, he still predominantly played three tech. He lived in the B gap, but that's a guy with experience, at least over tackle.
All right. Next guy I want to look at that I think is down at the Senior Bowl is Ty Robinson out of Nebraska, right?
I am, since I'm not going, I have a less memory of it, but it looks like Senior Bowl. Yes, he's going to be there.
Okay. He is 6'5", 6'8", 310. He is going to be a Senior Bowl guy. Let's look at where he lined up real quick. I don't know. Maybe you can beat me to him. Nebraska.
I'm trying, but you'll probably get there first.
I got so many damn windows.
I don't know how you do with all the tabs. But
Ty Robinson.
Yeah, I think you're going to beat me to it. I'm getting a weird receiver from Ball State. I'm getting different Ty Robinsons pulled up here. So may need a second to try to get him to come up here in the search engine. Yeah, you might have more luck here because I am getting the wrong guy. I don't think you want to hear about the receiver from Ball State, unfortunately.
I found him. Okay.
Well, whenever you have the data, hit me with it.
All right. Last year at Nebraska, boy, he's in Nebraska for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons. A little bit older guy here. So, A gap 60 last year, 304 B gap and 130 over the tackle. In 2023, 56 A gap, 230 B gap, 181 over the tackle. So his tape should be interesting. What was his production, Ty Robinson?
That's a guy that has some of the position flexibility and value there.
Let me see if I can
7 sacks last year, 13 or so tackles for loss, 37 tackles. You're right, though, the age, he's been in school since 2019, so he's probably 24 years old. So that's an older prospect that isn't ideal.
Once again, I have not. He will be next on my list to watch. We'll obviously hear a lot about him from the guys. They've got Draft Scout, for whatever it's worth, has a 6th-round grade on him. They have him as the 21st ranked interior defensive lineman on their sheet.
And he is 23, turning 24 in May, so right after the draft. So you are getting an older prospect.
All right.
All right. So good conversation.
Jordan Phillips, I think, is another guy people are interested in, right? But isn't he more of a nose defensive tackle type, I think, out of Maryland? He's going to be, I think, at the East-West Shrine game.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still working through the list. I can try to check here, maybe, if I can pull up Jordan Phillips.
What about the corner that you just broke down?
Denzel Burke. Yeah, that's a guy that I think is very scheme specific. I think he's going to play man heavy. If he's in tight coverage, then he can have some good reps. His 2024 season, not as strong as probably his 2023 season. My comp actually was a pretty familiar one, Akella Witherspoon, kind of a up-down corner, similar size profile, not great tacklers, can make great plays in the football. I think he's a guy, if you're asking to play in off coverage, off man or zone, he's going to struggle some more for Pittsburgh to play a lot of that. I don't know if Burke's a great fit.
Okay. All right.
And on Jordan Phillips, he played primarily interior guy, like you said, 283 snaps in A gap, 243 B gap, only 9 over tackle in 24. Did have 67 in 2023 with Maryland, but another one of those interior guys. Again, it's just so hard to find those base ends, even in this kind of changing world.
All right, so I think our takeaways so far when it comes to some of these defensive linemen are Grant impressive, Nolan impressive, Stewart impressive, Harmon definitely fit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
And then I liked Williams, and again, so some of it's about, do you want this guy to be more interior? Do you want more base end? If you want more base end, it seems like that list is thinner. To Harmon, I think for sure. Maybe Williams, and then from your list, maybe Turner as well.
Okay.
All right, we'll keep watching. Have a lot of to talk about, I'm sure, post All-Star games, post Senior Bowl, post Shrine Bowl, and learn more about these guys and watch their one-on-ones and team sessions and all that kind of fun stuff. So,
all right, I'll keep drilling down. I'll talk to you more about Ty Robinson next time we get together.
All right, good deal. Maybe I'll get him on my next report too, and do that. I'm going to do Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss, next, and
fun guy. At least in a little bit I've seen of him so far. Yeah.
All right, looking forward to it. All right, Dave. Anything else here to talk about in today's show? Any other news coming in on this pretty busy news day around the NFL?
I think we got to most of what we wanted to cover, did we not? Shall we get to some to the picks for this weekend?
Yeah, just 1 second. I know it's like the third time we've revisited it, but Jeff Howe of The Athletic has a tweet from earlier today. He says, quote, "With Pete Carroll taking over the Raiders, one name I've heard to watch a quarterback, Russell Wilson. They've mended fences per source, and Wilson could be a stopgap while the Raiders develop a long-term answer." And so to kind of answer my question from earlier about what was the relationship between Carroll and Wilson like after Carroll in Seattle traded him from Seattle to Denver, according to this one report, things seem to be pretty good between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. So really would watch out for the Raiders if Pittsburgh does not happen.
All right.
All right, Dave, let's get through some reader emails and close out today's show.
Well, let's get to our picks for the weekend quick here. For the conference championship games. We had the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Washington Commanders. The Eagles 6-point home favorites here. It looks like Jalen Hurts is going to rebound from whatever, I think, knee issue that he had in this last game here.
So no Kenny Pickett starting. Kind of looking forward to that. I don't want to doubt Washington. What they've done this run is phenomenal, and it's Jaden Daniels, but it's so much more than just him. Even other rookies like Mike Sanders still have had impact games and seasons, and Sanders still 2 interceptions to help upset Detroit. I've just been on the Eagles. They were my pick, starting with the playoffs to go to the Super Bowl, so I will stick with that. Even with a dinged up Jalen Hurts, I will take the Eagles.
All right, latest 6, right?
Yes.
I'm with you on that as well. So I think the Eagles defense would just do do more than enough to kind of make life hard on Jaden Daniels. That defense is just so well put together, as I think I mentioned just recently. It's hard to go against the Eagles here, especially if Hurts and Barkley and that offensive line plays up to their potential. Obviously, will be at home. I think this is the end of the line for the Commanders. I would not be surprised if this is not close at all. So I'll take the Eagles lay to 6 points. Buffalo Bills on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the one that I certainly will be interested in watching. The Chiefs are 1.5 point home favorites.
Oh man, this is what, the fourth playoff matchup between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and I believe Mahomes has won all the previous 3. Can the Bills, who have to go to Kansas City, go to Arrowhead, can they pull it off? I will say this is the year that Buffalo finally gets over the hump. They take care of Mahomes. Even in the Chiefs' win against Houston, it was not a convincing victory. The offense struggled. They couldn't put the ball in the end zone. I think Buffalo is just more fluid this year. The Chiefs have a good defense. They're going to be at home. But I think this is finally the season that Josh Allen gets some revenge, goes to his first Super Bowl. I will take the Bills, Dave.
I'm with you on this one as well, too. I think the Chiefs, the where they lack in the downfield passing game, and if the Bills can tie up Travis Kelce in this game and do what they need to do on defense with the way that they play up front there, even though they do have Chris Jones and all like that, I don't think it's going to be enough for a big quarterback like Josh Allen and all. I think it all finally comes to roost here. I think the Chiefs finally get knocked out of this one. I'm taking the Bills plus the 1.5. I think the Bills obviously win this outright.
All right, so we're both predicting a Bills and Eagles Super Bowl. So we'll see if that comes true and know by Sunday night. All right, Dave, now let's get to read emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's see if we can pull up a few here real quickly. We will start with, let me sort it one last time. Sorry about that. We have Joe Fazzino writes in, are we as a fan base being fair to Tomlin? Hey guys, first time writer here. Love the show and the website. I'll put this first so you don't have to read all my rambling. I guess my question really boils down to what our expectations really are for the team next year, and how should that reflect on a guy in Tomlin's position? Is it realistic to expect improvement next year? Is too much blame put on coaches when the talent isn't necessarily there? He says, I get people are probably tired of the discussion surrounding Tomlin as it has been beaten to death, but I can't help but look forward to next year. Looking at the quarterback talent available to us, and as you guys mentioned on Wednesday's pod, it's hard to see the team doing better than they did this year. Considering that the voices shouting to fire Tomlin will likely only get louder, there's also a large selection of the fan base that wants the team to tank for a better pick, but that would also put Tomlin in a horrible position regarding his job. Not that he would ever tank a team. He says, I don't know. He surely carries a lot of the blame, and you can't ignore some bad drafts and some bad coordinator hires. I get all that, but it also feels like he is put in a tough position, especially for a team who has overperformed given the talent on the team since Ben's departure. All right.
Hey, it's a lot there. My response to that largely would be he's the head coach. He has to bear responsibility. And are there times where the head coach gets maybe too much blame and also maybe too much credit at times? Sure. The thing that I kind of, steal the Family Guy term, grinds my gears is the comments when I hear about, the roster isn't good enough. Well, who's in charge of roster construction, or who at least plays a big hand in roster construction? It's Mike Tomlin. He's been here for 18 years. He has as much influence as probably any head coach in the NFL in terms of how that roster is shaped. It's not solely him. There's scouts and there's Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, but Tomlin certainly bears responsibility for how the roster looks. And so it's kind of like going to, I don't know, I'm trying to work on the analogy in my head, but going to like a chef that orders the ingredients and produces a bad meal and then blames the ingredients for not being good enough. Well, it's like, well, you ordered them, so that's kind of on you at the same time. So finding a franchise quarterback is exceedingly difficult, and I understand all that, and it's hard to win, and you're in an AFC with these MVPs and future Hall of Famers, and that is tough to wade through. But end of the day, the roster is the roster. Tomlin has to own that, and so he is the commonality in this drought, and so I can't really give him a pass for that.
All right, so you're going to all Bill Parcells. If he wants me to cook the food, you got to let me buy the groceries and pick out the groceries and all like that. Which Tomlin does have a heavy say in roster construction, and I would imagine draft selections as well too. Obviously, look, this team the last couple of years just hasn't been talented enough, and I think as a whole. I think there's multiple fingers to be pointed here. I think Art Rooney gets some at him. I think Omar Khan gets some at him. I think Kevin Colbert gets some at him while in his final days there. And I think obviously Mike Tomlin here. They just have not draft specifically, like we said. You roll back through several of these first rounders here, they just have not done a good enough job at drafting and developing and then keeping talent overall. And for an organization that prefers to build through the draft and cultivate talent to build up to a point, they have not done as good a job as they have done obviously in recent decades when it comes to this. So yeah, I mean, if Mike Tomlin has a heavy hand within all that, then yes, he deserves maybe more than divided out portion of blame with that. But I mean, whoever you want to put this on, and look, I still think for this, I had this team going 9-8, and the end all do all isn't what Dave thinks this team will finish a season at. Going into a season based on the way I see the roster and the way I look at the schedule and all like that, because so many things obviously happen during the season. And yes, this team had injuries, but look at the Detroit Lions, Alex. I mean, did any team have the trials and tribulations that team had from an injury standpoint?
No, their defense was a mash unit. It's unbelievable they got that far and had that kind of season with all the guys that went down for them.
Now, they did have a franchise quarterback, and that speaks loudly, right? Here.
And two great coaches and three great coaches, but two coordinators that are now head coaches.
Right, and the Steelers didn't have that. So, who take the quarterback, franchise quarterback scenario out of it. Mike Tomlin and the rest of the organization has failed this team the last couple of years when it comes to putting talent around non-franchise quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah, it's not been good enough in a lot of respects, and we don't have to relitigate all that right now. Let me just ask you this, and this is probably worth a separate conversation for a different show, but why do you think the team does not draft as well as they used to? Is it just it's harder to draft? Do teams just know more these days? Is more information out there? Is it Pittsburgh's lack of analytics that have put them behind the curve? Is it just the randomness? Were they just on a heater in the early mid-2000s? What do you think the reason is?
Well, I think if you look at players drafted before or after them in certain picks, you could definitely go back after the fact and say there were players there. I do think that sometimes some of the precedents and maybe analytics related, they are and the hearts and smarts and all like that, and saying, well, you can't measure, you can't look at, you can't judge somebody's heart when, with any type of a number and that kind of situation there. I just think some of the standards that they have when it comes to evaluating talent, they need to come off of. We talked about Fisk. We knew for some time that more than likely Brandon Fisk was not going to end up a draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? From a measurable standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He was too short, didn't fit the scheme, the system, and so he was going to likely be off Pittsburgh's radar.
I think sometimes they don't rely enough on the tape.
My view, and it's a lot of nuance, and just kind of give a blanket answer, is I think they got to a point in the early 2010s where they focused too much on the hearts and smarts and too much on pedigree and production. I think about Jarvis Jones, and I always think about when Kevin Colbert said we're happy he ran 4.9 at the combine because it hurt his draft stock and made him more likely to fall down to Pittsburgh. And they realized, okay, we have to consider athleticism in these profiles more. And then I think they overcorrected with trying to focus too much on 40 times and athletes, and that led to guys like Artie Burns and Terrell Edmonds and the like. And so I think Pittsburgh has not been able to really find a good balance. I do think maybe them being behind the times on analytics, that may have changed in recent years, that they've embraced analytics more under Omar Khan. I think even you hear Mike Tomlin, he talks a little more analytically in press conferences than he has in the past. And so hopefully they'll kind of catch up to that. But I think they've also been hurt by that overall. Kevin Colbert was deeply against analytics, no matter what he wants to say in the comments he's made since he stepped down. I mean, he is an old school boomer when it comes to that kind of stuff for sure. And so I think that has hurt them. But yeah, I just think they course corrected too much, and I don't know, it just didn't have a good enough theory of the case.
I go back to it shouldn't be so easy for us to exclude guys because of arm length and 40 times and height of defensive ends. You know?
Yeah, that note card of 50 names we have is maybe limiting them too much.
It shouldn't be that easy for us to put that together.
Right. And I want to clarify one thing I said. When I talk about analytics, analytics it's not always necessarily just a data point or a stat. There's a lot of good draft analytics about age indicator, and if you have this much of college production, then you're most likely to succeed or fail in the NFL. There's a lot of like studies that you can do on analytics. It's not just like an RAS number or anything like that. So I just want to be clear. Where I think Pittsburgh was looking at some baseline athletic profiles in 40 times and all the conventional testing, going beyond that and kind of digging more than the service level numbers. I don't think that they were doing, and that probably was hurting them, especially in a division where like Baltimore is as analytically inclined as probably any organization in football. Pittsburgh really lags behind.
Although in that same breath, would they have ever drafted a guy like Nick Herbig?
From the size profile standpoint?
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. Now that's under the new regime, right? And so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you go back to Colbert's era, I'm sure you can find exceptions. They drafted Tree Archer, which was a mistake, but like they had their own exceptions in size and guys who didn't fit every cookie cutter type of mold. So that's where the nuance comes in. It's hard to have a statement that applies to an entire 20-year tenure of drafting like Colbert had. But whatever the reason was, I think one issue Pittsburgh has run into, and it's obvious that they just have not. They've not drafted terribly, but they're not hitting those cornerstone guys like they were with regularity in the early Colbert days.
And I think that's where the nuts and bolts of this lies, is they got to do a better job of drafting, especially if they're going to continue on with the idea that they develop through the draft and subsidize that moderately through free agency.
Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be the model in which they build their teams, and that model has not been true the last couple of years.
All right, Chuck Griffith writes in, how do you watch an NFL play in real time during a TV broadcast? Most interested in the point in time just after the snap of the football, and then from there. How does this change when the Steelers are on offense and when the Steelers are on defense? Okay. I'm not, my answer here is not going to be earth shattering at all. For one thing, I will tell you that I try to do too much when games are live in the moment, because I live tweet. I do have the main TV on the game, and I do have YouTube TV running like I have the TV on the regular, whatever it is, 15, 20, 30-second delay, and YouTube TV seems to be more live in the moment. So I'll watch the play initially on YouTube TV, get a tweet what I want to tweet about that, and then try catch the play again on the big screen and all like that. As far as watching the actual play, it's more probably on a more generic base. I do try not to watch the ball as much, and obviously pre-snap I'm trying to see, okay, what's a personnel here, what's a formation real quick, and can I pick out man, zone, those kind of things there. And then I I'm not as deep as probably most people think. Where I learn the most about any given game in the day that it happens is after things calm down, I go through and rewatch the TV tape once, sometimes twice within a night. That's where I learn the most because I've got the quick back fork buttons, hot buttons and all like that. And I can really, really fine tune and drill down in that. So my live play-by-play TV watching. Alex does a better job of picking stuff up. And of course, he's not having to really live tweet, play-by-play. Alex does a lot better job of picking up key things maybe in plays in real time than I do.
You might be giving me too much credit because I feel pretty similar to you. The work aspect is one thing that kind of can take my attention off studying something on a play. But no, I'm kind of surface level. I always try to keep in mind the quote or the title of that Pat Kerwin book, Take Your Eye Off the Ball, but I'm just bad at it watching it live. I'm typically watching the ball. It's pretty surface level. And so, yeah, I'm able to really kind of truly study the game when you can go back and watch it at night when it's quiet and you already know the outcome of the game and the play. You can kind of focus on that. There are occasions where, I'm going to look for a certain thing. I remember after in the Bengals game, Week 18, after Russell Wilson took that sack on that 2-minute drill, I was looking to see were they going to keep Pat Freiermuth in to protect on that final play to give Dan more help, which he knew was only going to send 3 out in the pattern, which was going to be an issue, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty surface level. It's not sophisticated when I'm watching the game live. I'm just really watching it like everybody else watches it.
Right. If you were to quiz me right after a game, I can give you a loose interpretation of what happened. I can obviously remember certain key plays, maybe turning points of that. Obviously, big plays, touchdowns, turnovers, and all like that. But it's very, very loose. I don't fully understand. I don't have a great grasp of what happened in a game until I fly through the TV tape later in the evening. And then obviously once the all 22 comes out, diving deeper into that. So very, like Alex said, I'm very surface level in the moment.
And it's plus probably because we know we're going to watch the game back later.
Right.
If we didn't have that, we'd probably watch the game live with a different lens. But when you know you're going to get to go back and come through it later, you can kind of just A, enjoy the game, and B, just kind of watch it surface level. And then, that night you're going to fly through and get to really go to the nitty gritty of the game.
Probably not as exciting answer as people would expect, being as how we do this for a living. But that's that's what I do. That's what Alex does. All right, Mike Shorter writes in, thank you for doing what you do. This one's about tight end. Do you see the tight end position being a high priority in the offseason? Muth seems to be an above average player. Washington is a pure blocker, and Heyward and Pruitt are special teamers. A pedigreed tight end seems logical due to Artie's schemes. I'll let you go first on this because I do have some thoughts on this.
Saying another tight end?
Yeah.
I mean, we had a Tyler Warren discussion the other day. Can they add somebody? Sure, but it's not going to be a high-level guy. It's not going to be an early draft pick or a big free agent. You have your top two in Freiermuth and Washington. They like both. They're going to use both. They have different strengths and weaknesses. Freiermuth more the receiver, Washington more the blocker type. Yes, in Arthur Smith's system, you need to have multiple tight ends, and maybe they add somebody, maybe get a better inline and younger inline blocker to replace Pruitt. I don't know really how well Connor Heyward fits in this system. I don't know really I don't know if they know what to do with him. So maybe add some clarity there. But I just don't think you're going to invest with all the other needs. I don't think they're going to go back to the tight end well early again.
Well, we talked about what's going to be the, is Arthur Smith going to want to stick with multiple tight ends again moving forward? Odds are yes, right? At least from where we sit right now until we think something changes there. I will tell you this, if, and obviously I think a lot of people have him going higher than where the Steelers pick. If Tyler Warren was on the board at when the Steelers pick, it would be hard to turn that down. Because you could integrate him within that offense along with Freiermuth, especially in 2 and 3 wide receiver sets. And you would have a super dynamic tight end receiving group for sure. And Tyler Warren can do it all for you as well too. He blocks well on top of it. Connor Heyward is not doing this team any good on the field from an offensive standpoint right now. Michael Pruitt's best days are long behind him. Even his best days didn't add a ton, I didn't think there. If you didn't get a guy like Tyler Warren early in this draft, I don't think it would be the worst thing at some point to maybe address one that was well-rounded. Now, those are obviously few and far. I don't want just one guy that's going to be another blocker, like Washington. I don't want a guy that's a quasi just a wide receiver. But if you could get to me, it's like, either Tyler Warren early or you go later with a guy that you think that could help you on special teams and maybe supplant two guys in one, like a Connor Heyward, Michael Pruitt.
Yeah, and you do want depth because if you lost Frymouth to Washington, you need to be able to replace him.
What about Bartholomew out of Pitt, man? That guy early on in his career was really something to watch. What if that guy is sitting in the mid rounds of the draft?
I don't know if I'm for it. I can maybe see it happening. You're right. He had a hot start to his career, then it kind of faded. The quarterback play later became more inconsistent. Did he have a year with Kenny Pickett? Is that kind of where he had?
I thought so, wasn't he? Yeah, wasn't he part of that?
Sounds right, like his freshman season. Just to kind of think about, why that production waned a bit and why it was good for a season. I don't know. I mean, like if you go sign Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper, then you can't be a 13 personnel type of team, unless we're trading George Pickens, which is possible. So I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling to go add a tight end. I think they probably will add somebody, but I think it's going to be a pretty lower level type of move.
How hard would it be to pass up a guy like Tyler Warren if he was sitting there?
I mean, I get it. And as you said, all good coaches should be able to manage. And you got to look at not just he's a tight end, but he's a weapon and he can align in different spots. And, Brock Bowers had some ambiguity about his role and fit at the NFL level. And he's doing just dandy here with the Raiders breaking records. And if you can get that kind of guy, it can be huge for your offense. But it's also like, again, if you're drafting Tyler Warren and we assume they're going to add a receiver in free agency, then how are you going to get everybody on the field and get everyone the ball? And I don't know if that kind of fits well with what Pittsburgh, how the offense works and how it needs to improve.
Man, that Tyler Warren could do it all, can he?
Yeah, I was watching him against Ohio State, just pancaking a linebacker. And of course, he's just a great receiver. And
he can go vertical. He can get under set. You can do so much stuff with that guy, man.
Which means Pittsburgh will do none of that.
You're right. Overall, and look, I haven't even gotten hardly any into this tight end. Is my loose perception is this is a great tight end class. Is that how you feel about it?
I haven't spent much time researching the tight end class. There's a couple good names. There's Colston Loveland from Michigan, who might even go before Warren. It's going to be a good competition between those guys to be first tight end off the board. I think there's is there a kid from Bowling Green, Fannin, I want to say.
Harold Fannin Jr.
Harold Fannin Jr., yeah. He was really productive. I don't know exactly what his NFL draft prospects are like. So it seems like to be a decent class, but I truthfully have just done a little research on it.
The two, obviously, that I know are the local kids from just watching them, throughout the season. Tyler Warren at Penn State and Gavin Bartholomew out of Pitt. Those are the two guys I know the most about. Obviously, I'll get a little bit deeper into some of these names. I will tell you, Draft Scout has Warren top, Colston Loveland out of Michigan, number 2, Mason Taylor out of LSU, third, Arroyo out of Miami, fourth, Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green, fifth, Gunnar Helm out of Texas, sixth, Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame, seventh, Aronde Gadsden Jr. Out of Syracuse, Jake Brenningstool out of Clemson, and then Bartholomew closes out the top 10 on Draft Scout.
All right. So, yeah, we'll do some more research and we'll get reports up. I know there's one on Warren that's going to go up. I think we just received it. There's one on what's his name? Colston Loveland. It's going to go up here within a day or two. So, yeah, again, we're early in this process for Dave and I. Spent a lot of time, as you guys can tell, studying D-line more so than tight end, so I'll keep working through it.
All right, one last one from Chris Lookhart here. Says he's from Zeeland, Michigan. As a Penn State fan, it's hard to say, but can you guys look into Will Howard? He's a big body type quarterback in the same mold of Josh Allen. I feel no one is talking about him, he says. Thoughts on obviously from watching a couple Ohio State games in the national championship game just recently in the playoff and all like that. I know a little bit about Will Howard. I haven't gone deep into his tape though.
Yeah, I haven't either. Just watching college football playoff. We'll have a report on him here pretty soon. I'm sure. I know Daniel Jeremiah said yesterday, I think he's in his top 50 players. And so is that, just from him riding this wave of the playoffs and winning a championship? I don't know. It doesn't feel like he's going to be the guy, but I'm sure he'll be talked about in that bucket of Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe when it comes to Pittsburgh and day 2 quarterbacks.
Probably going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks taken though in this year's draft, you would think?
Seems so based on kind of current wisdom. I think after the top 2, it's going to be a pretty good fight for 3, 4, 5, but I think Howard will be in that group. Yes.
Did you get a chance to watch that Canadian kid any of that?
No,
highlights that's going.
I just
which one's he? The senior? He's the Senior Bowl one, right?
Yeah. First Canadian from that school to go. I know apparently he's got a big moon ball, a big arm. I saw a clip or 2 of him airing it out, but
their college did a good day. Their college did a good job on their Twitter feed of putting video links, videos to plays. Obviously they're highlights and all like that. But find that kid's college Twitter feed and then search for videos and his name underneath it. You'll find a lot of clips on him. Probably the only tape that you're going to find on him.
We're resourceful. We'll find some. We had some Canadian tape. We had a Giovanni Ricci guy last year played tackle up in BC. So I know he's got a big arm. This kid has a big arm, a moonball type of guy. And so
it's weird to see the Canadian rules with the wide receivers running towards the line of scrimmage. In those highlights and all. I've just done the highlight search on him though.
Yeah. And I try to stay away from too many highlights because I don't want that to kind of color until after I've started watching the guy. So. We'll listen. We'll probably get a report on him too at some point.
Right, we will. All right. Anything else?
No, more just musing on Twitter, but buzz about Russell Wilson in Seattle. I see Peter Schrager posting a photo of Russ and Pete Carroll from their Seattle days. Ian Rappaport tweeting, Russell Wilson wanted to go to the Raiders last offseason. I'm not sure if that's the accurate phrasing, considering he ended up in Pittsburgh, but that's going to be a story here for a while.
That went from 0 to 90, didn't it?
It really did. Yeah, it went from Pete Carroll getting the job to now Russell Wilson potentially joining him in Las Vegas.
All right, we will get back after this on Monday, discuss which teams are playing in the Super Bowl. We'll see whatever else news hits, talk about draft prospects, all the usual stuff that we normally do. We actually got 2 hours out of this, and this was probably supposed to be a 45-minute show. So go figure. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. You want to chime in on a couple of the prospects that we talked about today, do so. Theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. We're starting to scratch the surface on this. Make sure you pay attention to SteelersDepot.com for Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl stuff starting to roll in here as of today. So with all that said, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.